Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is Season 1, Episode 2 of Rolling with RAQ. In this episode, I'll be recapping and discussing Season 1, Episode 2 of Power Book 3, Raising Kanan, Reaping and Sowing. If you haven't seen the shows yet, I recommend going back, watching my preview episode, first episode as well, where in the preview I provide an overview of the show, some information about the characters, and then you have like the first episode recap. So at this point, having given up the corners, RAQ had that as part of like a bigger plan. The coroners were out in the open, exposed to not just other crews, but also the police. And so, you have the issue of people rolling up and shooting at you, the police jumping out on you and whatnot. It's not a complete loss because RAQ also has distribution in Manhattan and a few other spots, as well as having the stash house in what appears to be an abandoned house. So she needs to make some changes. Things aren't exactly where they need to be, but giving up the corners weren't like a really great loss, right? It was something that she was probably going to end up dropping anyway. But with that, it brings them into contact with Juliana, a Colombian lady who owns a bodega with her husband, Gabriel. She's been watching them, and Lulu has been aware of her as well. Does some digging around, realizes that she has a cousin who's involved in the trade up in Washington Heights. So the two have kind of been talking for a little while, sort of feeling each other out, and it's presented as an opportunity using the back of the bodega as a stash house, temporarily at least. Right. So there's a potential to solve multiple problems at once. Now, Kanan kind of needs to be moved out the way. So RAQ sets it up for him to hang tight at the stash house after school to kind of keep him out of trouble, but also to keep him safe for the time being. She's made peace with Unique, but Buck's people are still upset. There's kind of this sense which Unique explains to her, like, he's called off his people, but the streets need a body, right? They want some kind of payback. RAQ has probably been through this kind of stuff before. She knows what the other side is thinking, what they're going through, their mindset. So Kanan's been out of school for a little while, since like the shooting and all this kind of stuff and whatnot, just to kind of wait for things to cool down. But again, he's not fully grasping just how serious the situation is, right? That his life is in danger and what he did was a really big thing. He thinks everything's over, apparently. When RAQ and Juliana first meet, she has like a really bad black eye, right? Immediately walking into the store, they make eye contact, and it seems that the two are like, or at least Juliana's been aware of RAQ, but they haven't really spoken. Lulu immediately begins to question her about like what happened to her eye and stuff like that, at which point the husband Gabriel, who from the beginning is an annoying person, steps forward and immediately wants to know why he's talking to her, how he knows Juliana, all this kind of stuff. It really just shows him as being a jerk from the beginning. And something that I found kind of telling was that throughout the show, or at least the first season, you have Lulu with Famous's sister, where when Buck came down the street shooting, he immediately tries to protect her from the possibility of getting shot, right? Like he throws her down to the ground and throws himself on top of her as like a shield. And so here again, you have it where he sees Juliana's black eye and immediately is concerned. Obviously someone hit her in the face, but he starts asking questions about like, what happened? Are you okay? All this kind of stuff, right? He shows concern. RAQ, it's not that she doesn't care. You see her like looking at her eye, but she doesn't say anything, right? Lulu's the one to more respond. Marvin shows up at the club. He's thinking about throwing a party. It's kind of smoothed things over already and whatnot. So they're still selling drugs there. He wants to throw a party just to, sort of put it out in the streets that they're still here, everything's okay and whatnot. Sort of like a PR move, ironically. And so he meets Tony, they're flirting and whatnot. And this is despite this woman being really problematic, which I kind of question Marvin for, because I'm sure that he would have known about the exchange between Tony and RAQ when she was being like reckless with her mouth. But it also provides an opportunity for Marvin to meet Symphony. Lulu knows that RAQ is talking to Symphony, in part because he's the one that comes in, kind of calls away from the date when Kanan gets into his problems, but also because he was there when the two of them were chatting it up. So somehow he's relayed this information to Marvin for whatever reason, because obviously RAQ didn't mention this to Marvin, and why would she, that she's talking to this guy? But, Lulu mentions it to him. Marvin, being the loudmouth person that he is, rushes in and begins giving Symphony a hard time, just real reckless and very rude. In a sense, it's also kind of protective of RAQ, right? Like he wants to know about Symphony's intentions and whatnot. I mean, granted, this woman is like a drug dealer and she's like tough and stuff. I don't think you need to look out for her like that. right? But Symphony seems like a pretty nice, decent guy. Never mind that Marvin is a drug dealer. When he approaches Symphony recklessly, Symphony gives him back the same energy. He doesn't back down, right? Like, he's not afraid of Marvin. He knows who Marvin is. And even though Marvin threatens to beat him up or whatever, so he's not afraid of Marvin. He's not worried about him. He actually stands up to him. And Tom's like, if he wants, they can fight. He's down for whatever. So you kind of get a peek into Symphony where it's like, oh, okay, like, this guy's no punk. RAQ is still afraid for Kanan, right? She wants to keep them safe. And so as a way of appeasing him, but also moving him out of harm's way, she decides to put him somewhere where her people can keep an eye on them. Perfect place is the stash house, seemingly. So Marvin picks him up, drops him off at the stash house, and you kind of notice some tension between Jukebox and Marvin. Jukebox is there as well. He stops by to pick Kanan up after school, and he's walking with Jukebox and the rest of the kids. While there, Marvin offers Jukebox a ride, and, she brushes him off. He makes like a second attempt at it, like asking her, like, is there somewhere I can drop you and whatnot? But she continues to brush him off, right? In this instance, where normally he seems to kind of ignore her, he's offering to kind of take care of her, right? To do a kindness for her. And, Jukebox just kind of brushes him off, right? Turns out that she's a part of this boosting group called the Low Life Crew, which I think is like based on a real crew that was in New York. I don't remember if that was the exact name, but there was like a boosting crew like this in the early 90s. And so pretty much how it would work is people would want to buy like the latest stuff, right? Like in this case, Ralph Lauren. And you might not have like the money. So like boosters would go into stores, steal the stuff, and then they would like sell it to people at like a discount. So in the 80s, you had people that might wear suits and things like that, dress like really, really fly. But by this point, hip hop is now becoming more of an influence, right? Urban streetwear fashions and things like that. And it's at this point where like in the early 90s, you would have some of these street brands emerging. But at that point, it was still a lot of like preppy clothes, like Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger were really big at that time, right? Jukebox is in Manhattan spending time with her girlfriend, Nicole, or this girl that she likes, Nicole. And she explains the backstory behind Ralph Lauren, where sort of like her, he's this regular Jewish guy from the Bronx who wasn't supposed to be a part of like the country club set. So he developed this brand representative of all of these things that were unobtainable to him, which is kind of ironic because it becomes this like really popular preppy brand that then provides him with this life, and for her, it's an opportunity to have and wear, to have this persona and be a part of this world where she's not supposed to have access to these things, right? Like these preppy clothes are not really made for her. Being someone from Jamaica, Queens, these aren't the type of clothes that you'd expect her or kids her age to be wearing, right? It's supposed to be beyond their reach. But here it is that her friends and her are dressed, from head to toe in Ralph Lauren. And so we see that she's boosting clothes, which is like stealing clothes really, and selling it on the street to make money. So she's like a hustler. This is just another instance of where it's like the difference between Marvin and RAQ, right? Like RAQ makes it clear to Kanan his job is school. Jukebox, meanwhile, is out here stealing and no one seems to care, right? Like RAQ doesn't really ask for him to do anything else, right? Like Kanan doesn't have a job after school. That's it. Like just go to school, get good grades, take care of that, and I won't ask for anything else, right? She gives him what he wants within reason because it doesn't look like he's being spoiled, right? He has like the latest Jordans, he has nice clothes and this kind of stuff. It doesn't look like she's getting his stuff boosted, like she's probably just buying his clothes for him. But here it is that he's pretty much within reason being given anything that he wants. But then you look at Jukebox and she has a completely different relationship with her father, right? Like her father isn't going to these lengths for her. Not to say that he doesn't love or care about her, but it's not as visible, or he doesn't like quite go out of his way in the same way that RAQ does, in caring for Kanan. Like he just doesn't do that for Jukebox. Kanan has everything he needs. His problem is that he's kind of greedy. RAQ probably gives him a little bit too much. Whereas you have Jukebox who's out here hustling and trying to make a way for herself. She's not going about it the right way. And that's something that stood out to me watching the show. Here it is that RAQ is doing everything possible to keep Kanan away from the streets. She's doing wrong, but she doesn't want that for him. But then here you have it that Jukebox, who like past a certain point seems to be kind of taking care of herself. They care about her, but she's not being as closely watched and guarded as Kanan. Part of it is that she hides away parts of her life from her dad, right? From the family, really, in part because of this distance with her dad, but also, because of her identity, right? RAQ's mom is kind of all over Kanan. She knows where he is, who he's with for the most part, right? But there's this distance between Marvin and Jukebox. She's stealing clothes and selling it. And even if they don't exactly know what's going on, you would have to question, if I'm not giving you money, you're a teenager, you don't have a job, they're pretty expensive, especially for a teenager. How are you getting them? Or I guess that speaks to Marvin and his mentality, because why are you okay with your daughter stealing stuff from stores and potentially risking getting arrested or getting into some kind of trouble, right? You have the money, buy her stuff, or make her get a job or something. And so we come to find out that in part, she's stealing clothes and selling them, hoping to save up money to record a demo. The people around her make money, regardless of how they do it. But here it is that she's out in the streets hustling because she wants to have a future, right? Whereas RAQ is doing everything possible and giving everything possible to Kanan while, trying to keep him out of the streets, right? So you look at the difference in the way that the two of them are being raised. It might not look like a big deal, but Jukebox can certainly end up getting into trouble and wind up having a record later on down the road, which can create huge problems for her, right? But there's seeming less concern for Jukebox. Not to say that they don't care, but Marvin in particular doesn't seem to be going above and beyond to ensure that he's keeping tabs on what's going on with her. It seems like the siblings meet up each morning and kind of discuss what happened overnight, the plans for the day and whatnot, sort of like a status report just about every morning over breakfast. And so during one particular meeting, RAQ has kind of figured out from Kanan that he got the gun to shoot Buck 20 from his friend D-Wiz. And so they start to put plans in place to rectify the situation. During that same conversation, the siblings are sitting down to eat, and something that you notice is that Marvin is constantly eating. And in this particular scene, they're sitting at RAQ's dining room table, and Marvin is eating whatever it is. It looks like maybe peanuts or something, and it's like shells or whatever. And he's just making a complete mess on the table, eating and just dropping the stuff on the table. So the scene begins with RAQ kind of walking over and handing him a bowl, which I would think if you sit down to eat peanuts or something messy like that, where you don't eat the entire thing, wouldn't you just automatically get a bowl or something or something to put the mess in so you can not throw trash on the table? And so she hands him this small bowl, and there's a little exchange between RAQ and Lulu, who doesn't look too pleased, right? But it becomes obvious that this is something that they've previously discussed, right? But Marvin is out of the loop once again. He kind of questions what's going on? What are you guys talking about and whatnot? So Gabriel, the husband at the bodega, is really annoying. When Lou and RAQ show up at the shop to discuss potentially using it as the stash house, they notice that Juliana had a black eye, right? They kind of table that for a moment and begin discussing business, right? It becomes clear that they're there to discuss this arrangement. And RAQ is the one talking to him, right? She's looking over the space that they're going to use in the back of the store, explaining the details, the current conditions, things like that. But instead of speaking to her, the person that's talking to him, he actually turns and begins speaking to Lulu, right? At which point Lulu interjects, he points out that, you should be speaking to RAQ. She's the boss, right? But it kind of shows Gabriel is being sexist in that RAQ is the boss. She's the one that's talking to you. But instead of responding to her, he instead turns around and talks to Lulu, the other man, right? He just naturally assumes that Lulu is the one in control, right? But Lulu corrects him as, I'm not the one for you to talk to. She's the boss. Turn and talk to her. If you're discussing business and she's here, she's talking to you, she's the one that you should be addressing. Don't turn to me, turn and talk to her. Just kind of putting him on notice. So Kanan is hanging out at the stash house pretty much after school with Scrappy, who's kind of his babysitter. And he realizes that basically RAQ has sent him to the stash house as an after school program, right? And he's disappointed because he thought he was there to learn about the drug business. But really it's your mom has put you into teenage daycare to keep you out of trouble, right? And RAQ Scrappy kind of like makes fun of him about this, right? It's just another example of just how clueless Kanan is. Like, he thinks he knows everything, but he's just reading situations wrong and really doesn't know much. He's smart, but he's like young and foolish at the same time. So back at the house, we see RAQ getting dressed to go out, right? Which is kind of interesting that you see these different sides of her character, because it's not like that long ago she was talking to Juliana's husband. She wasn't really cold, but like very business first kind of setup, right? And we see earlier in the day with her and Marvin and Lulu, where it's like she's very strict and about her business, right? But then she's like very normal when she's at home with Kanan, like a normal mom. And actually, we've seen Kanan's room up to this point, right? Like, it looks like your average teenager's room. It's a little bit, it looks like a boy's bedroom, right? Especially when he was a kid, and then you see it change a little bit when he's older. He has toys and little awards and stuff like that around the place, school projects. It looks like he probably used to play basketball or whatever. So you get a peek into his personality, right? It looks like a normal teenage boy's room. But in this scene, you get to see RAQ's room, right? And it's actually right next door to his. His room is like green. You see other parts of the house up to this point. We've seen other parts of the house, mostly Kanan's room, the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room downstairs, which are all kind of like together. It looks like a normal house, but in looking at her room, it looks like a normal woman's bedroom, like a house might have looked in the 90s, right? It looks like the house that like some of my family members had in the 90s. You look in her room, the walls are purple. She's like listening to R&B, getting dressed to go out on what turns out to be a date, right? But when you look at it, it looks like a woman's room, right? Like a normal black woman's room at this time. The walls are purple. You have a few little decorative accents. You know, looking at this room, it wouldn't really be what you pair up with like RAQ in the streets, right? I don't know what you would expect, but it's like here at home, it just looks like some normal bedroom, right? It's like intimate. It's her space. She's getting dressed up to go out on a date like any other normal woman would. Kanan goes into her room to talk to her about him being ferreted away in the stash house. And once that's put aside, he kind of picks up on the fact that she's getting dressed up to go out. And he kind of asks like, oh, you know, like, where are you going that you're so dressed up? And so he puts like two and two together, realizing in that moment that, you know, she's probably going out on a date or something like that. At which point, like, he kind of gets this look in his face of being a little bit unsure of the situation. Like, I don't know, it's like a look of worry, not so much for her safety or anything like that, but maybe like a little jealousy. At which point she picks up on this and reassures him, like, you know, you don't have to worry about anything. I'm just going out. You know, that doesn't change anything. Like, it's fine. You know, you're still my baby boy. I love you. And, you know, even if I'm dating someone else, like, nothing's gonna come between us, right? But yet still there's this like look of unease. You know, she tells him like, you know, you stay in, I'm going out, but if you'd like, you can have a friend over. And she takes it upon herself to suggest that he invite over D-Wiz, right? Like, have him come over, you guys can watch a movie, hang out and stuff like that while I'm out. And with that, she kind of sets this plan in motion, right? It's another thing that Kanan doesn't pick up on. Like, she's been asking about D-Wiz. Previously, she asked him about where he got the guns from. And now she specifically mentions, like, you know, why don't you have D-Wiz come over? Whereas I would think, why specifically him? You know, why not tell him to invite Jukebox over or Famous or something like that? You know, why this one particular friend? Or why not the whole group of friends, right? Especially given that she's been asking questions about him, right? But Kanan doesn't really pick up on that. Instead, he's, like always, seemingly one step behind. But then again, I guess at that point, he's probably more focused on the fact that RAQ is going out and being uneasy with that, rather than paying attention to him suggesting that he invite D-Wiz over. It's a little bit unclear at this point. Like, obviously, RAQ has dated, right? She's like, we've seen her date people before, like S1E2, right? When the show starts, she's dating this guy, High Post, that, well, actually he's her boyfriend. And at that point, Kanan is 10, whereas now in the present, he's 15. High Post died in like 1986, a year after we saw them. So Kanan would have been like 11. So that's about 4 years or so between then and now. Between his death and now. It's unclear, though she tells S1E2 on their first date that it's been a while since someone's asked her out, But it's a bit unclear, has she not dated anyone since High Post, or is it just that she hasn't been out in a little while, but has dated people since High Post, right? And so it's kind of unclear as to why Kanan is uncomfortable with her going out on a date now. Maybe it's a matter of that she hasn't, if not dated, then probably hasn't been in a relationship for a while. So he might have just gotten used to having her all to himself and having all of her attention focused on him, just the two of them in the house and stuff, and being comfortable with that. So maybe that might be the source of his discomfort, because he seemed to be fine with High Post, like he liked High Post, because he specified that he treated her well. But that kind of made me question, has there been someone in the past that didn't treat her well? It's not impossible, but I think it's unlikely, given not so much because of who she is, but because of her brothers and all that kind of stuff. I would wonder, what exactly has Kanan seen in being around his mom, her relationships and stuff? Was there someone aside from High Post that would give him pause? Because if he liked High Post and how High Post treated her, I don't understand the concern with her going out on a date with someone now. It's has something or did something happen in the past or before High Post or since, where there was someone that didn't treat her well or that he didn't particularly care for, so that was just something that kind of stood out to me. And I was watching specifically him mentioning that he liked High Post, not because High Post was nice to him, which we saw, but because High Post was nice to his mom. But I guess that could just be some guys are very overprotective of the females in their lives. So we see Marvin is concerned and protective about her. Never mind that she's this tough drug dealer who's out here shooting guns and stuff, but he's worried about some guy that she's dating and his intentions, right? Whereas I think RAQ can pretty much handle herself. And then here it is that you have Kanan, where he might just be concerned for her, not just out of jealousy or partially out of jealousy, but also, just wanting to know that whoever's with his mom is treating her right, so that can be part of it as well. So aside from RAQ's bedroom, another little nice touch that you notice is that when you look around the house, it looks like it's decorated by a woman, right? A woman definitely lives there. And then on the first floor, in the first episode, when Kanan was coming downstairs and she's sitting at the table, the camera pans across this cabinet that's on the other side of the wall with the kitchen, right near where the doorway stops. And it's different family photos, which is mostly her and Kanan, right? There's a picture of Kanan as a baby by himself. There's a picture of her and Kanan. It looks probably the kid that played Kanan when he was about 10 or so. And, there's a picture of her holding Kanan as a baby, holding Kanan when he's around 10 and stuff like that. And just these typical mother and son type poses that you might see, right? Typical family pictures. There's another scene later on that shows a shot of the living room, and there's another family photo there, but it actually looks if you ever seen those, those hood poses that people do, right? Where it's her and her two brothers, where, they're kind of all wearing these white sweaters and the two brothers are kneeling down on either side in front of her, whereas she's standing in the middle and whatnot. It's sort of a b-boy stance for the three of them and whatnot. I don't really remember what she's wearing. I think it might have been she's also wearing a sweater or whatever. But I guess that would make sense in a way, because she's the only girl. But it's also the two of them bent down, but not bowing exactly, but they're kind of taking a knee and she's standing in the middle. Right. So it's a lot of symbolism in that photo, but I thought it was a really nice touch to have those little details within this house, within this set, because it also speaks to RAQ's concern with family. Regardless of whatever's going out in the street, you get the sense that she does love and care about her family. They all still love and care about each other. So whatever's going on in the street, that's one thing. But in looking at her home, you see these little touches. And it's just a reminder that, number one, she's a regular woman, at least at home. And as far as the design of the house, the decoration of the house, that there are these little family touches, these little pictures of her, her son, her brothers, the people that matter to her. So it's never mind that she might be a drug dealer, she's still very much a woman. But she's a mom, she's a sister, she's an aunt. You see these little touches around the house that tell you like what's important to her, right? And it adds like another dynamic to the character, because obviously I don't think Kanan is the one picking out this stuff for around the house. You know, like this is her house and this is her stuff that she's put together. So it shows you like what's important to her in her space where she can be herself, where she can be vulnerable. These are the things that she chooses to put on display. Like this is what she chooses to decorate the house with. And I just thought it was like a really nice touch, like these little details that you see them add in. RAQ arranges for Lulu to kind of intercept D-Wiz. And Lulu in turn tells D-Wiz that, oh, you know, Kanan is going to be at this party, so let's go there instead of going to the house, right? But RAQ doesn't go to the party. It turns out that she goes on a date with Symphony. I understand the rationale, but it just seemed very inappropriate to hire like a sex worker for him, right? Like it's like statutory rape. I understand it, but it's like at the same time, it's a little bit gross. You know, like he's a little boy. He's not a little boy. He's a teenager. But the fact is that this is a grown woman, right? And she seemed to be a sex worker. It's wrong. Like if he was college age, you know, it might be a little bit different. But because he's not an adult, he's like 15, 16 years old. He's Kanan's age, right? It just feels, I don't know. I guess the rationale was to show him what Lulu probably thought was a great time, but it's incredibly problematic, right? Only to then kill him later. Like it just feels icky. And then the thing is, so I had a question. It's like, you know, while you're out here with this kid killing him, here is RAQ on a date with Symphony. Like, I mean, maybe he's supposed to be like her alibi, like, you know, she knows what's about to happen. She set it in motion. She created the plan, but then she's nowhere near the scene when it's going on. So maybe she didn't want to kill D-Wiz because she actually knows him. You know, she's probably known him since he was like a little kid. If Kanan's known him since he was a little kid. So maybe that's why she didn't do it. You know, and calling Symphony at the last minute, he then becomes an alibi for her, right? Because Marvin and both Lulu are at the club. Lulu is kind of like the last one seen with D-Wiz. So I guess maybe if people are asking questions, they might ask, you know, you might not assume that he was the one to kill him because you know he's Kanan's friend, but it certainly looks like RAQ kind of set things in motion to get him out of the way while kind of keeping her hands clean and removing herself from the situation. So a fight erupts in front of the club when a guy is like rude and handsy with Tony. Marvin sees this and he hastens to her defense, which is something that you kind of notice with the brothers, right? Like they're both very protective, not just of RAQ, but also of women in general. RAQ is out on the date with Symphony, right? Like during their first date, she asked him about urban planning. And again, they're now at his apartment, which appears to be, it's like a nice apartment. It's a little small, but it's like perfect for a single man, for a bachelor, right? But on both dates, she's asked him about the things that he's interested in, but genuinely, right? Because she seems to actually take an interest in him. And she explains that she likes learning about stuff that she doesn't know. So, you know, sometimes when people are into things, especially like on the first date or something like that, you might ask and more as like an icebreaker, a way to kind of get to know them. But here you see that she actually takes an interest in him knowing about urban planning. At first, he kind of brushes her off, like in the sense that he doesn't think she really cares, right? Like it's not that interesting. It's nerdy and whatnot. But she explains to him that like, no, I'm not asking just to be nice, but because I'm actually curious. Like, you know, teach me something. This is something that you know about that I don't know anything about, and I'm curious to learn about you. You know, it kind of, I'm curious to learn from you. It kind of seems to be like, not just getting to know the character, but this seems to be like something that attracts her to men. Like of the three men that we've heard of her dealing with so far, being romantically linked to, which would be High Post, Kanan's dad, Defcon, and now Symphony, it seems that she likes guys that she can learn from, right? The first two guys, unfortunately, were like drug dealers, so she learned about drugs from them. But here it is with Symphony, she takes an interest in what he's interested in, right? Not just out of being kind or, you know, trying to make conversation, but in that she likes that he's smart. You know, she seems to be attracted to intelligence in whatever form it might take. And in this case, he's a regular guy. He likes nerdy stuff. But she likes guys that she can learn something from. But it's also clear that, like, you know, there's certainly a physical attraction on her part. And so she kind of gets the train chugging along, you know, to move their relationship on, beyond them just being flirty with each other and talking, right? So physically, he's obviously attracted to her as well. She's attracted to him. He expresses that, like, maybe they should take things slow, get to know each other, blah, 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 blah. Like, he's not pressuring her in any way for things to become physical. She's actually the one to initiate physical contact, right? Like, he's poured them some wine and she comes on to him pretty much. So it's like another facet of her personality. Like, I mean, she doesn't like force herself on him or anything like that. He reciprocates her interests, but it shows you that she's not passive, I guess, in any areas of life. She takes the initiative. Like, she kisses him first. She actually starts flirting with him at the bar. It seems like he's with it, but kind of reassuring her, like, don't feel pressure for this to happen. So at the very moment that RAQ and Symphony are being, let's say, intimate for the first time, Lulu is pretty much killing D-Wiz. What D-Wiz thinks of as the greatest night of his life ends with him being murdered. Right? It's a little bit cold of RAQ, that while you're here carrying on with this guy on this date, here you are with this hot guy, your brother's across town killing your son's best friend. It's kind of cold, man. It's a little cold-blooded. I understand it, but it's cold-blooded. And Symphony serves like multiple purposes for her. Part of it might be, it's a way of making sure that the night's memorable for him. If anyone asked RAQ or asked Symphony, where was RAQ or whatever, you'd remember where she was that night, right? So, I guess maybe it's a thing of like kind of killing two birds with one stone, right? You have an alibi and a good time at the same time. You then look at Lulu's face and he's not happy about doing it either. And we see this when she mentions it the first time when they're sitting down with Marvin. The look in his face is just like he just looks so displeased with the situation. Like, after actually killing D-Wiz, he looks to be on the verge of tears. He's then sitting in the car, looking at his body, laying in this alleyway, wherever it happens to be, just shaking his head. Like, I don't think he'd enjoy killing anyone, but it's not sitting right with him. It's what needs to be done, but it bothers him. The question for RAQ is, this is what her son did. This is outside the business. This is like a personal thing. So why don't you kill him yourself? Honestly, I understand why he had to go, but I kind of question why she didn't do it. This is a mess that your son has created. I don't know, maybe like Lou is like the family hitter or something like that. When you need a job to be done, you send him to do it. But I would question why RAQ, if her son created this situation, created this mess, and she's attempting to clean it up, I don't really understand why she didn't shoot him herself. But maybe it's a thing with her being the leader of the organization to keep the train moving in the event things should go, left, that she removes herself from some of these more messy dealings. So if anything goes down, she can still be in place to continue running this enterprise. So maybe that's the rationale, to give her plausible deniability so that she's away from the situation should, any questions be asked. At the same time, Kanan he's sitting alone at home waiting for D-Wiz to show up and happens to see Davina out the window. He goes out to talk to her, and it just seems like for a young girl, her life is quite rough. Her mom is like loud and rowdy and isn't taking the best care of her. Turns out she has a younger sister who's a baby, and she's stuck taking care of this child because the mom isn't taking care of either one of them. She's been suspended from school, and it's just a lot going on. Then to have Buck 20 die, who, regardless of his fault, seems like he was like nice to her. It's just a lot. Regardless of whatever he might have been doing to the street, she was a young girl in a rough place, and he took it upon himself to be nice to her, to look out for her. And so when this girl starts talking badly about him, it upset her, which is understandable. Here you have this little girl that you see with this baby, right? The baby's her sister, but essentially she's taking care of this kid. It's pretty much her child because the mom is a mess, right? Here it is that you see her when she's dating this drug dealer, a guy who's being nice to her, kind of reminds you of someone else, doesn't it, right? She's a cute little girl, reminds me quite a bit of RAQ, in that here's this young girl who has quite a bit of responsibility. Like, RAQ had Kanan when she was quite young. She dated a drug dealer guy and he kept her in the stash house, which was in part to keep her safe while she was pregnant. It's like, well, one would ask the question, if she's pregnant, what are you doing in the stash house? You know, why was she trying to make money, right? Because she's trying to take care of herself, probably to prepare for the birth of this child with her being a teen. And here's this girl that comes along, right? Kanan takes a liking to, and maybe that's part of why he's drawn to her, right? Part of it is that he's known her since they were very young kids, and he's liked her since then. But even more now, because he's getting older, and in some ways, she seems like a nice little girl. She's not like rough and tumble like RAQ, but RAQ probably didn't start out that way either. But there are definitely some commonalities between Davina and RAQ, at least with them as teenagers, and maybe that's what draws Kanan in. Thanks for tuning in. This is the segment episode, and I'll be dropping a new episode every day from now until the season premiere. 2 down and 8 more to go, so be sure to check back tomorrow and every day after that as I count down to Raising Kanan's season 2 premiere on August 14th. To ensure you don't miss any episodes, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell, and check out my Rolling with RAQ playlist. Go ahead and click that thumbs up button if you like what you saw, and go ahead and share it on social media. More importantly, drop a comment, let me know what you think. Are you rolling with RAQ or someone else? You still rolling with RAQ? You off the train? What's going on?